Welcome to our third Friday legal webinar. If it's your first time attending the presentation, I want to remind you to please accept the recording option. I want to remind you that this presentation is being recorded and you will all receive a copy of today's recording. My name is Sandra Vidrio and I am here with the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation. So thank you everyone for joining today's presentation. Our topic for today will be the top 10 legal pitfalls for new businesses, presented by the team at New Business Community Law Clinic at Berkeley. And I want to remind you that we have interpretation feature available. So if it's your first time attending, I want to remind you of some of the Zoom chat box feature here. So to participate in sending a chat, whether it's through a computer or a tablet, simply select either the chat option or the more option, and then you will find the chat option. And if you're wanting to listen into English or Spanish, make sure to select the language interpretation feature, which is provided by the team at Linguistica. And I want to take a moment to say thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to bring these weekly webinars and monthly legal webinars to our small business community. So thank you to Bank of America, Comcast, Bank of the West, Bank of the Sierra, Chevron, Donna G Sales, JP Morgan Chase and Company, Union Bank, and Wells Fargo. Thank you so much for your support. This is our agenda for today, and our presenter will be Bill Kell, who is the clinic director at New Business Community Law Clinic. And after the presentation, we will be having a live Q&A session. Our organization is here to support and guide business owners as we transition into this new normal, right? We're still in the pandemic, but we have now new ways of conducting business and we know what the market trends are. And our team is here to provide you with one-on-one consultation, no cost consultation in what we refer to as technical assistance. So if you're looking to expand your business and looking for ways to promote online or seeking funding opportunities, please feel free to contact our office here at 559-222-8705. We also have resources available for Spanish-speaking individuals, English-speaking individuals, and our community as a whole, and of course, those startup businesses. And we are continuing our weekly webinars. We will be launching our fall cohort of the Womanpreneur and Latinapreneur program in the month of in late September. So please send us an email or reach out to us via phone if you are interested in that program. And of course, our CDFI program is continuing to grow and thrive here, helping our rural community businesses as well as other startup businesses. And with that, I want to go ahead and jump with introducing our speaker for today, who is William Kell, Bill Kell. So Bill, I will be making you host. That way you can share with us the top 10 legal pitfalls for new businesses. And if you
Wonderful.
Yes, perfect.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. Yes, and I'd also want to introduce Kelly Woolfolk, our supervising attorney, who's joining in on today. So she's going to help me maybe with some of the questions and answers too. Kelly hails originally from Oakland. Is that right, Kelly?
From Oakland, yeah. Well, I grew up in San Francisco, but yeah, Bay Area.
I've been practicing a long time. So we've both been practicing quite a long time. Me since '87, Kelly since forever. And so we have some things to share with you because mostly what we do work on is small businesses, new businesses in particular. And by the way, you should just know that any business that's getting started, I mean, even if they're going to go to, become Intel, Microsoft, whatever, they all start at this early stage and have the same legal issues to solve. And so these legal pitfalls that we want to try and highlight for you are just, what we have learned over a long period of time are things that, most businesses are challenged with at the beginning. So we're just going to try and tip you off on them and go forward. And I certainly have some question and answer afterwards. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining in. Let me go to my share screen here. And here's my PowerPoint that we're going to go through. And what I'd say to you all is definitely include questions in the chat. We won't do them, live while we're going along here, but because we want to get through everything. But at the end, we will definitely have time for questions. So let's put this up here. Good. Oh, a little higher. Up there. Good. Okay, here we go. And put that up there too. All right, good. So top 10 legal pitfalls for new businesses. And one thing I would just say to you guys is, there's so many things we're worried about these days, COVID, kids getting back to school, fires. I mean, it's kind of dark in the Bay Area right now. So we're not here to scold you. We're not here to tell you more things that you have to, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? We're going to try and put these as positively as possible, okay? Because you just have enough to deal with right now. All right, so of course, at the beginning of every workshop, we say this is an introduction to legal issues that commonly affect businesses. And of course, working with an attorney on your individual situation is always recommended. That's where you can really get, legal advice that will help you. And if you want to do that, by the way, just make sure you sign up for, the next third Friday. We do have these office hours that we make available, free office hours for people who can't afford legal help. You can also, and we'll put this information at the end on our last slide, sign up through our website, our New Business Community Law Clinic website. And that's where we do 11 to 2 Mondays and Wednesdays, every Monday and Wednesday. So you can talk for 45 minutes for free with a lawyer if you can't afford one. And so think about doing that if you'd like some individualized advice for sure. Okay. All right. Well, let's get going. So today's agenda. First, I wanted to sort of flag, how the challenges of starting a business are, daunting in and of themselves. But where do all these legal issues come from when you're starting a business? So I just wanted to sort of preview that a little bit for you there. And then we're going to do these top 10 legal pitfalls after that. So, okay. Well, first thing I think about is, what do you, move my thing here so you can see the top here. Okay, where should I put this? I guess I'll put it down the bottom here. Okay, here we go. Okay, now you can see it a little better. So what does a new business have to figure out? I mean, any kind of business has to figure out. Well, our MBA school and a number of things online offer this kind of document that helps capture what businesses need to do. It's called the Business Model Canvas. Okay, why am I showing you this? I'm not trying to take you to MBA school, but I just want to acknowledge all of the stuff that you folks have to put together to form a successful business. And the Business Model Canvas lays this out in a sort of a matrix like this, but it sort of makes sense. You start with, okay, what is the value that you're going to be providing for customers? So just figuring out something that people haven't been doing before or things that people really need and aren't getting enough of, that's hard enough to figure out that. And then you have to figure out, okay, well, who are the customers that are going to buy this thing? And how do I manage my relationships with my customers? What channels do I use to communicate and connect with my customers? And what kind of relationship do I want to have with my customers? I mean, is it sort of impersonal? Are they just buying things online on my website? Or do I have, more of a concierge kind of helping relationship with my customers? You have to figure all that out. Yeah, of course. And then you have to think about the activities that are designed to deliver the value proposition to the customers. And maybe, what are the resources that I have to do this? Maybe I have some cash resources. Maybe I have a good name for my business, which is branding, that people can find me easily because of my good name of some sort. Maybe you have good advisors that have helped you get to the point of where you are right now. Good staff that are well-trained. Those are all resources that you have that help you do the activities that help you deliver the value to the customer there. And then finally, you may have some partners, community partners. I mean, anytime you're on a website, of course, community partners can be like PayPal or, different website services that you might be using, but maybe you have some partners that help deliver your customers to you, marketing people, things like that. Certainly your accountant is probably a good key partner for you. And then, of course, you always have to worry about where you get your revenue and all the costs involved. Okay, so why did I go through this view? I wanted to flag for you, so where are these legal issues coming up in all of this stuff that you're trying to do here? Well, a couple of things I can think of. So, for example, activities that you're doing are often regulated by the state. So if you're doing anything related to food, you're going to have a permit from the state in order to have food handlers preparing that kind of food there. If some of your resources are, like your branding and your name, these are things that are protected by trademark law. Nationally, you could get a trademark that would keep others from, taking your name and confusing customers with them, something like that. If you have partners, well, usually partners are connected to you through contracts. And so you usually want to have that in writing. You want to make sure you know what to expect of your partners and things. And then back with the customer parts, I mean, thinking of things like if you're on a website, you probably want to have some terms of use for that website so that people will know what to expect from you. Are you taking their private information and using it? That sort of thing. So this is why it's really helpful when you're talking to an attorney to not just come to them and say what you think you need, which is of course helpful and important, but also make sure you take some time with them to explain your business model here. What is it? What's the value? Who are your customers? What are some of your relationships? They're going to do so much better for you when they understand this. And I guess that's the next thing I wanted to flag was just, successful entrepreneurs manage a whole bunch of relationships, all of this stuff, employees, investors, creditors, suppliers. And what I would say is that each of these relationships, except for the friends and loved ones, usually have some legal requirements that have to be met in order to validly have like an employee relationship or something like that. And so, that's part of the reason that we're trying to be around to make sure you all know what are some of the requirements for these important relationships that help you do your business there. And then here on the capital side, I just want to flag for you, when a business is getting started, see here on the left here in the blue and the green, companies will raise money from a lot of different sources, their family, their friends, maybe these things called angels, maybe you heard of. So these would be people who have a little extra money, that they can invest in businesses, not because they're looking for a huge upside, like venture capitalists, for example, which I'll tell you about in a sec. But these are angels who are investors, early stage investors that might help you, create then the resources you need to hire enough staff to do what you're doing. And maybe they care about what you're doing. They like, they like a particular kind of food. So they'll invest in your restaurant or something like that. So those things are all great. And then sometimes you'll get some loans from people. You might raise those funds as loans or as contributions or stuff. But what I'd say to you is that any of these kinds of entities underneath here, a corporation, an LLC, a partnership, or a sole proprietorship, are the way people do these kinds of, at these early stages, do the business here. And what I will say is that funds usually are more easily put into an entity, as we will talk about in a minute, one of the pitfalls. So the other thing I just flag for you is that if you're going for venture capital, meaning these sort of stranger groups of capital that are out there that will invest in you, well, they care more about the profit. They're really saying, okay, if I'm going to give a business $1, I want to see $20 back in 2 years. Okay. Well, those folks, you tend to really have to form a corporation to interface with them. They don't really want to give to an LLC. They certainly won't give to a sole proprietor or a partnership. Okay. And then, of course, if you get really big, you get to be a public corporation as an IPO or something. But here's the problem. You see this pink area here? There's plenty of lawyers out there ready to help you with anything you possibly need to satisfy a venture capitalist. Back here, you got us, you got a few people who will, maybe defer your legal fees or stuff like that. But it's very hard to find legal help at this early stage here. And that's one of the reasons that, these pitfalls can mean, sometimes success or failure for new businesses there. So let's get right to that. Now, let me just move this up out of the way here. Gosh, wish I could just get rid of this. Okay, here we go. Put that over here. Okay, here we go. So here we go. Investors, creditors, as I said, will always be double checking if you solve these legal challenges that you have before giving you money. So even the best businesses will look bad if you have things like unwritten agreements with people, maybe workers that you sort of brought on and you're not quite sure whether they're a contractor or an employee, filings like permits or things that you missed. And then here is intellectual property. If you're using it in your business, this would be things like, content or trademarks or other things like that. If you don't nail down that you own these things, then, one of these investors is just going to go, wow, this is too much. I don't want to take on the liability with this. So this is why doing it right the first time is really a good idea. Okay, so let's start with the top 10 pitfalls to avoid here. That's a pitfall, I think, or something looks bad. Okay, well, here first, not choosing an entity or choosing an entity that really doesn't fit your organization there, okay? Okay, here's the positive way of saying it. Formalizing your business comes with lots of good legal perks, like, for example, if you are an LLC or a corporation, you have more ability to raise capital. A bank will give you a loan, an investor will give you investment. You also potentially have this limited liability shield around you so that you have separation from the business's liability or obligations. And that means, you can enter into transactions and stuff like that without worrying that your house or your kid's college fund or something like that is at stake. So definitely look into forming an entity for your business, formalizing it in some way. The 4 factors to consider when you're choosing an entity are these, okay? It's not the cost, because it's very easy, very cheap to form a new entity. And you can pretty much do it yourself. $70 to form an LLC or a partnership, $100 to form a corporation there. But here's the way you sort of choose if you think about it, okay? So think about who's making the decisions in your business. Is it just you? Is it you're sharing that decision-making process with somebody? Well, there's some entities like LLCs that work with both pretty well. A single member LLC or a group of LLC members who just work together to make the decisions and stuff. Now, again, if you're having to have a corporation, which has a little more formal decision-making structure, well, then you're going to have like a board of directors that is sort of removed from the day-to-day operations, but oversees them in some way. And again, those board members have to get together. They have bylaws that they have to follow. It's a little bit more formal. And so I guess what I would say to you is, and we get to this later, the formalities part, choose an entity that works for the level of formality that you're willing to do on a regular basis. Because a corporation where people aren't taking minutes and aren't doing meetings with the board and stuff, that is open to potentially a lawsuit that says, look, your liability shield of a corporation, it doesn't mean anything because you're not acting like a corporation. So, maybe then a judge decides that you're sort of you'll be personally liable. So these are some things to think about. Okay, so go to the next one. How will the business be taxed? Well, your choices there are that the business could be taxed as a business itself, or it could simply be a vehicle for the profits flowing through, or what we call passing through the business to the individual owners of the business, okay? And the corporation is more like the first, paying entity taxes themselves. And the LLC or the partnership is more of the pass-through there. Okay, we can talk to you a little bit more what the pros and cons are, but this is a critical decision to be made. Might be good to make this with an accountant if you have one. Yeah. Do you need this limited liability shield? As we were saying, it's a good idea generally. I would say there's only been one business that we formed in our 13 years of this clinic that felt like they could be okay without having a limited liability shield. And that was a bow tie company. We couldn't think about any ways that a bow tie could kill somebody. But I suppose if you did like a Mickey Mouse tie, then Disney would sue you out of existence. So, there's still some liabilities potentially there even. But limited liability is a good thing generally, because if a lawsuit happens, you don't have enough assets in your insurance policy or in the business itself to cover that judgment, well, you get to walk away from it. You basically get to walk away because it's the business's obligation and not yours. But if you didn't form an LLC or a corporation, these are liabilities that you will have personally going forward. And, just get a lot of insurance in that situation is what I would say. Finally, and I already talked about what entity will attract the kind of capital you want. As I said, an LLC or a corporation will allow you to raise pretty much any kind of capital you want, except for venture capital, which will only go to the corporations pretty much. And the default, see, if you haven't set up one of these entities here, you're going to be seen as either a sole proprietorship, if you're a single person or a couple, or if you're a partnership, you'll be seen as a partnership if there are just many people that are working with you as leadership of the business here. And again, that's unlimited liability. Everything's on the hook there. Your house, your car, your college fund, everything there. So think about it. Here's a one-page chart at this Google Drive thing that I think I'll put in the chat here, but you can probably get this on the recording, that we put an entity option chart that describes all the different entities and how to form them. Okay, so choose an entity, choose it wisely. Okay, all right, second thing, not clarifying worker relationships. That's what you can see, worker relationships up here. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Well, first I'd say that, of course, at an early stage, people will work for you for a lot of reasons. Maybe they're family, maybe you're going to pay them, maybe they're just doing to get some experience. Okay, well, on your side of this, it makes sense that there's some fluidity to it because, people will come and work and help you out with the business for a lot of different reasons here. Okay, unfortunately, the state of California and the IRS say no. We're going to presume that everybody working for you is an employee. Okay, an employment relationship has, as you might guess, there are 17 things that an employment relationship has to have. You have to withhold money for taxes. You have to do I-9s to make sure people have a right to work. You have to set up workers' comp. You have to set up disability. I mean, all kinds of things that employment relationships have. You should know that the IRS and California presume that everybody working for you requires all of these things. Okay. If you want a different kind of worker, then you have to affirmatively set that up. And here's probably the most common one that people try and set up, and that's the independent contractor arrangement. Okay, well, one thing you should know, maybe you've heard about this with Uber and Lyft and these guys who have been using contractors to mostly in their business. All right. They got a lot of scrutiny and some new laws passed on them in the last couple of years that now affect all employers in California. And as you might have, ironically seen, they produced a public referendum that lifted them out of these laws. Now these laws will apply to basically everybody else, and they're pretty tough. With an independent contractor, you can't control them very much. This is the first of this ABC 3-part test that you have to always think about when you're hiring a contractor. You can't control them very much. A good example of this would be like a plumber. I got a bad drain. I don't have a plumber on staff. I need this drain unplugged. It's a project. Okay, come and do it for me. I'm not going to pay you by the hour. I might pay you by the hour, but I'm not going to give you a salary to do it. I'm going to pay you, however much it takes to get the drain unplugged. And then you go away and we don't have any relationship anymore. Okay, well, that's the first prong. If you don't control them very much, okay, maybe you can have an independent contractor, but you can't have it for like a key position, like a CEO. Well, a CEO, you got to control that person, right? So, that's one of the problems there. Sandra, I think we need to bring somebody else in. No, maybe somebody else got in. Okay, hope that person just got in because I'm the host now. I guess I have to let people in. Okay, so here's the rest of the test. They can't provide the continuous services of the business. So a good typical thing about that is like a daycare center. All the teachers in the daycare center should be employees. Okay, they're going to be expected to be employees. And as you might guess, like with Uber, they're a transportation company. You would guess that all of the drivers need to be employees. Well, without this proposition, they would have been found by a court. In fact, they were found by a court that up until the referendum, these people were supposed to be paid as employees. Finally, the third prong is the independent contractor needs to be in business for themselves and able to work for others, like that plumber I was talking about there. You know, they can't just be your personal plumber. Okay, in that situation, they would have to be more like an employee. Okay. All right, so yeah, you can see if you were an independent contractor before yourself and being hired, you have to fill these requirements for yourself too. You have to have like a website for yourself, and you have to have business cards for yourself, things like that. But if you're hiring an independent contractor, this is the 3-part test you have to follow. And there are big penalties for misclassification. You know, you can go back 4 years. This is what's going to happen to Uber, is they are going to have to go back 4 years for the statute of limitations to pay all of these drivers as employees for the past 4 years, unless they come to some settlement with them. And then finally, you have to have a written contract that shows that this is an independent contractor relationship. We do recommend that you cover certain terms in that contract, you know, like liability. Like if that plumber comes in, you know, you should sign something that says if they screw up your plumbing, then it's their thing to fix, not you. And same thing with intellectual property. Yeah, let's say you hire somebody to do the website for you. Well, then, you know, you want that website to be yours. You need to have some ownership transfer from the person who did the website for you. We cover that in a slide in a minute. Now, these other sort of unpaid workers, generally, we'd say stay away from unpaid workers. But for for-profit people, you could potentially use an intern. The problem is they're generally more trouble than they're worth. They can't replace employees. You got to do an educational program for them. Yeah, I definitely want to have that relationship in writing too, as a volunteer relationship. Now, volunteers could work for nonprofits. That's good, but I'd also have an agreement for that. We have some templates you could use to just clarify. Look, I'm a volunteer. I don't expect money. I don't, you know, all of my intellectual property I produce is going to be yours. You know, that sort of thing. Okay. So, pitfall number 2: worker relationships. Be kind of careful with the way these are set up. Number 3, protecting IP. Hey, here you go. Kelly, are you there? Maybe she just stopped off for a second, but I will start with the description of intellectual property, or I sort of defer to Kelly sometimes because she's such a expert in this area here. But there are several ways that you want to take advantage of intellectual property law to protect things of your business. So let's start with trade secrets. These would be things like recipes, like the Coca-Cola recipe or something like that, a secret information that you have that is giving you an advantage because it's secret. Your client list, that's a good one too, okay? So the idea here is if you take reasonable steps to protect it, so for example, a new worker comes on, you have them sign a non-disclosure agreement, okay? So that means that they're under a contractual duty not to disclose your recipe or your client list to anybody else. You know, put it behind a password on your computer or something like that. As long as you take reasonable steps to protect it, then if somebody comes along and, you know, espionage tries to, you know, hack your computer and get it, you'll still be protected, you see. It's because you've taken reasonable steps to protect it. Okay, the state will recognize that. Here's another, copyrights. Okay, so if you have content that you're creating, let's say you're creating a training program for workers or something like that. This might be a curriculum, like just this PowerPoint I got here. Okay, you should just know that once you put it in a tangible form, like we have here, like it's code, or it's on a screen or written down, then it is already protected to some extent. So somebody can't just come along and take it and use it and copy it and profit from it. However, we do recommend that you do file it with the US Copyright Office, because once you do that, then they are supposed to be on notice that this is copyrighted, and then you can get extra damages, okay, from their using it, even if, you know, you've had no contact with them before. And now for copyright, this is where you might want to have a license. You might license somebody to use your content, or you might license, you know, somebody else's content for you to use. Patents are things you definitely want to get attorneys to help you with, because these are new products or services. Actually, usually it's a product or a process, I should say, that has a unique design that hasn't sort of been seen in the world before. And the only way to get this is to file an application with the patent office that shows how to do it. And you basically publicly disclose how to do it. But then the beauty of it is it gives you the right to prevent other people from doing it without, licensing your patent, even people who developed it on their own without knowing anything about your patent, you see. So again, all of these things need to file with the Patent and Trademark Office. Here's a really important tip though. If you have a product or process with a unique design, keep it to yourself, okay? Don't disclose it publicly, like, at a workshop like this or something like that, because once you have publicly disclosed it, you have 1 year to file a provisional patent application or you lose it totally. You cannot protect it with a patent after that, okay? So talk to a patent attorney if you have any kind of this, unique design product or process there. Finally, trademarks. This is the distinctive sort of marks, names, slogans, maybe even a song, maybe even like a smell or a color that distinguishes your business. Okay. And other people should not be able to use those unique things about your business to confuse consumers and say, no, that's us. Here, try Coca-Cola instead of Coca-Cola. Oh, yeah, well, it's the same. It's sort of the same thing. It's just as good, though. You see. So you see, trademarks are meant to help people from confusing consumers in the marketplace. You usually want to get that through filing through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, so you'll have national protection for that. It takes about $600 or $800 to do it, but we have a nice PowerPoint overview on how to do it yourself. Okay. Now, just know that if you didn't file one of these, you still, after a little while, operating in your geographic area, will have protection in your sort of small geographic area. Okay. So if you've been, Betty's Donuts, for 20 years, you can probably guess that within, 30 miles, nobody else will be able to come along and be a Betty's Donuts because people know you in the area there like that. It's just now another Betty's Donuts could come along and register that as a national trademark that constrains you to that area there. So you wouldn't be able to go statewide to do Betty's Donuts if somebody else has that national trademark, you see. All right, this is a lot to cover here. I'm sorry. This get a little more simplified as we go along, but we wanted to put the hardest ones, the toughest ones out first. Okay, so not checking the ownership of IP that you use. That's what that says there. Okay, what does that mean? That means that if somebody gave you some content, like developed a website for you, or developed a logo for you, or something like this. If they did that while they were working for someone else, and I mean employed by somebody else, I don't mean a contractor just doing this for a bunch of people. I'm talking about an employer. If you developed some software while you were working for Microsoft, that means that you may not be able to take the IP that this person is giving you or you're paying them for because it's not theirs. It's not theirs to give you, okay? The default rules are, if the IP creator is an employee of somebody else, then it's the employer that owns that IP, okay? If the IP creator, though, is an independent contractor, okay, well, usually the contractor owns the IP, unless, again, you change it in a written agreement. Somebody developing your website, in the agreement with the website designer, it should say, after we develop this is your website because you paid for it, you see. Now, there's this thing called Creative Commons. This is mostly for things like software, code, stuff like that. Just you want to check the source on that, because if somebody's using a Creative Commons site to get the code, then it may come with requirements that say, for example, okay, you're going to use this code in your code, you got to make that code public for anybody to use. So just check the terms of use of that particular Creative Commons before going forward. Okay. All right, round number 5, halfway through. Be careful with the way that you pass out shares of your company, ownership shares of your company. What do I mean like that? Securities. Anytime you give somebody an interest that's like it's like an investment contract, okay? A share of stock potentially allows you to not only have a say in a corporation's dealings, activities, but it also potentially gets you profits from the business, from the corporation itself. Also, you might be able to sell that stock in the future and make a big upside because the stock has gone up in value, okay? Well, these are highly regulated by California and the US SEC. So that means that you can only give these things out very carefully. That means that you can't do things like go to your church and say, hey, I'm starting a company. Come on, guys, come in and buy some stock. That actually violates federal law if you did that, okay? Because you can only pitch and advertise securities in a certain circumstances here, okay? So how do you be careful? Okay, so you should only use stock, selling stock or shares of your business if you formally grant that share or stock to somebody else by the leadership of the organization, the LLC or the corporation. It's got to be in writing. Okay. You have to file things. You have to register that stock or that interest in a company with the state of California and with the feds. Okay. Because they want to make sure this was done correctly. Generally, you can only share these interests with 2 groups of people. Okay. One group is insiders. So if you're doing an LLC or a corporation, anybody who's in the LLC or the corporation, or anybody who's related to anybody in the corporation, family members, stuff like that. Or you can sell these things to rich people. Okay. And I'm not being, silly here. I'm saying that actually under law, you can only sell these things to what are called accredited investors. These are people who have a net worth of over $1 million or are making more than $250K a year in their income. That $1 million excludes the value of their house. Okay. So why is it set up like this? Well, it's because the idea is what's common about those 2 groups is that they generally are able to protect themselves. The insiders, because they know you and they know, generally you wouldn't mislead them, or they know enough about the company to know when you're baking the books or stuff like that. Okay. The rich people generally can look out for themselves because they have advisors, they have accountants and stuff like that. So the feds and the state generally say, okay, well, survival of the fittest there. That's fine because they can protect themselves. But everybody in between, generally, unless you're using this thing called crowdfunding, which we could talk about later, a portal, a website that helps you invest little sums of money if you're not a rich person, then you're not going to be able to purchase shares like this. Okay. Now, here's one other thing you should know. If you are starting a company and if you are saying to the people inside the company, like your employees or something like that, hey, I'm going to give you some stock over time as long as you earn it, over the next 4 years. Well, you just got to know that that's a very special kind of earning securities kind of relationship that the IRS is going to allow you to take some different tax advantages with that, but only if you file a specific election, what's called an 83B election, within 30 days of receiving that unvested equity. Okay. But if you miss that 30-day filing, you are stuck with the probably higher taxes you're going to have to pay on this thing as this ownership of the shares vests over time, you see. The 83B election allows you to pay all of the taxes that are due at the beginning of that vesting, that 4-year vesting period, and that way saves a whole bunch of taxes usually. Okay. All right. Talk to an attorney if you have any questions on that part. All right, here we go. A few more. Sorry, guys. We'll finish this up pretty quick, I think. Not following corporate formalities. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, a corporation will offer this limited liability protection, but only so long as you act like a corporation. And I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law, bless his heart, ex-brother-in-law, he set up a corporation that entered into a whole bunch of obligations, and somebody sued him. And it turned out all they had to do was look a little bit into this, and they found that my 4-year-old nephew was the treasurer of the corporation, and his 2-year-old sister was the secretary of the corporation. And my brother-in-law was basically running this thing all by himself, not having meetings, not having minutes, anything like that. They were able to just pierce right through and say, this is actually ex-brother-in-law and not a corporation. And he was on the hook personally for all kinds of stuff, as he should have been. So anyway, here's the thing. When you have a corporation, and I'm going to talk about an LLC in a second, officers should generally be different people, not one person filling all these officer positions. You have to issue stock. You know, a corporation has stock. If you don't get around to issuing stock, then you're not really a corporation yet. Board must follow bylaws. Sometimes I've had corporations who don't even pass any bylaws. These are the rules that the board members have to follow in order to take action like this. So, you know, follow those bylaws and hold regular meetings. You know, we say quarterly meetings is probably enough, and take minutes of those meetings to show that you acted like a corporation. Okay. Now, here's the thing. If you don't like that level of formality, well, this is where you might think of forming an LLC, because it has more flexibility. You generally just have to follow whatever the LLC operating agreement is as to when you're going to get together, how your decisions are going to be made, things like that. So if you don't like formalities, LLC might be a good idea for you. Okay, here's a couple more things. We've had this come up a few times, not anticipating changes in the business. And what do I mean by that? I mean, at the beginning, when people are getting together in this business, this is not so much if you're just yourself and your business. Okay, so, you know, taking a momentary break if it's just you. But if it's other people, okay, well, let's have some agreement early on when everybody's still friendly as to a few important terms. Like, for example, what if somebody is screwing up? What if somebody's not doing well? How do you get that person out? Is there a cashing out possibility in this situation here? Because if you don't agree about this in the beginning, you know, that person whose poor performance is not going to agree to any change, you know, to being let go or anything. So changes in the business's activity. You know, if you're thinking that you might, you know, go beyond California at some point, well, make sure that people are on board with that at the beginning, so nobody can, you know, veto it at that point when you want to go, you know. Here's a big one. If new contributions might be needed down the way to fund things, yeah, I put something in an agreement that says if the company determines that additional contributions are going to need to be made, then let's have it be equal pro rata among all of the founders. Okay. Dissolution, you know, what's the reasons for dissolution? If somebody, let's say you have a 3-member LLC and one person leaves, does that mean the other 2 can continue it? You know, again, get this agreement early on before it really happens. And then, of course, always build in some kind of dispute mechanism if you can, so people don't have to go to court. You know, generally that'll bankrupt everybody. So try mediation or arbitration, you know, different ways to get to an agreement. All right, we're almost in the home stretch here, guys. Customer relationships. Probably generally a good idea to manage those relationships in some kind of writing. Okay, unless you're like a retail, you know, you're just like giving food out, or somebody's, you know, I don't know, you're digging a ditch for somebody or something like that. Okay, that's fine. But if there's any sort of promises that go with what you're giving the customer, yeah, maybe have some things like you're producing something for the customer, you know, some furniture. How about having a little bit of a product warranty that goes with that? What will you fix? What is on them? You know, if the couch turns out to have, you know, bad chemicals in it, are you going to be liable for that? You can waive that if you put a liability waiver in it. If you have a website, you should have terms of use, terms of service that say how the website is going to, operate, what's expected, what if somebody tries to hack you. Privacy policy would be important to have if you're collecting any information from your customers. They need to know under California law what you're doing with that information. And generally they can request that information be, returned to them or even destroyed or something like that. So that usually goes in a privacy policy, again, if you have a website. And then again, service consulting agreements, you should have some way of saying to them, okay, this is what you can expect from me. This is how you're going to pay me. This is what happens in terms of default if somebody goes, doesn't follow the agreement. Just have this agreement, again, at the beginning of the relationship with the customer. This will then, help you a lot with managing things that go wrong along the way. All right, we got this last one here that I know we have one more after this, but it's an easy one. So worrying too little or too much about lawsuits. What do I mean by too much? Can't you, shouldn't always be worried about lawsuits? Well, here's the thing, any fool can sue you. So don't stay up at night. Focus on what you can reasonably do to make things safe. That's all that really is expected of you. Somebody can throw you a lawsuit, but if you have done what is reasonably required of you in terms of your duties to other people to keep them safe, then that lawsuit isn't going to be worth anything, really. So one of the first things I would do, besides forming this limited liability entity, I should have had that one number one. Okay, so form a limited liability entity and then get some insurance. Okay, shop for a broker for that insurance, because a broker will shop amongst a bunch of different policies for you and not just like a State Farm agent who's, maybe a nice person, but they can only sell you State Farm insurance. So, instead get a broker who's on your side looking for the best deals among different insurance companies. Okay. And these are the kinds of insurance you probably want to get. General liability insurance. That's basically any harm that your business causes somebody. Somebody comes and slips and falls in your front room, of your office, that's general liability policy. Professional liability, which is often called E&O or errors and omissions, that's if you're using any kind of expertise that you have. You're looking at a deck for a homeowner before they buy it. Okay, is that deck soundly created? You're an engineer, something like that. Well, if you're sort of weighing in with your expertise, you're going to need professional liability insurance, just like I need professional liability insurance as an attorney, you see. So it's a different kind of policy than general liability. Vehicular would be one also. If you use your vehicle in a business, your usual personal vehicle policy isn't going to cover it if it turns out you were doing deliveries for your business with your car. Okay. Get all the permits that apply to you before trouble happens. I can't tell you how many people come to us and say, oh, I want you to help with our new granola business. Oh, that's great. I'm happy to help with that. And in fact, we had a tasting last week. Oh, you had a tasting last week? Yeah, we did it out on the commons. A lot of people liked it. It was great. Oh, did you get a permit for that? Well, no, we're just starting out. Gosh, did you have peanuts in that granola? Well, sure. Why are you asking me all these questions? So what I'm saying, get those permits before you do something that's regulated, because if somebody sues you and you didn't get your permit, that's like automatic liability. It's like the judge will just say, sorry, you were supposed to get that food handler permit before you sold food, and we're going to hold you liable for it. So, and then finally in the pandemic, number of things to think about. One thing you should know, which we're always shocked about on the legal side, is that entrepreneurs have so many responsibilities right now that the state has put on you to make your workers safe, to keep your workers safe. So if you go to Cal OSHA, Occupational Health and Safety Administration, they will tell you all of the things you need to do for your workers, okay, in terms of masking, in terms of vaccination, in terms of, taking preventative measures. One thing that it requires is that you have a written COVID prevention plan in place that workers are trained in to know what to do in situations. But you should also have something for consumers. You should also have something on your front of your business that says, what you expect. Are masks going to be required coming in here? Here's one: waivers for close contact activity. If you were like doing somebody's nails, or you're, giving them a massage, or some kind of close activity where COVID is more likely transmitted, you might want to have a waiver. And we have template waivers that we can send you that would basically say, look, COVID is something you could get any place, but we're going to be in particularly close contact, and we're going to do everything we can to try and have precautions, take care of the risks, but it may, you may still get COVID. So a waiver would say that you wouldn't be liable for those mistakes that might not be enough to protect people, like stuff. Okay. All right, well, why did I say this was the last one? Well, the last one's sort of logical, and that is probably a good idea to get some legal help from the start. You're getting some from us, but lawyers can be kind of expensive. Yeah, they can be kind of risk averse. They'll be alarmed when you tell them everything. You should tell them everything. And they might be unaware of your business strategy, and they're kind of boneheaded sometimes. But still, they can steer you past a number of these common pitfalls before they happen. And they are really good investment. And what I would say is most new businesses are trying to sort of push the envelope, trying to do something new. Well, the lawyers know why that might be new. For example, there was a business that came to us that said, our business presumes that you can record somebody without their consent. Okay, well, you can do that in Georgia, but you can't do that in California. And so a lawyer listening to you saying that's our business model would say, gee, we got to come up with something different because you can't do that under law. So then you would save all this invested time and marketing and everything for doing a business that can't be done legally, you see. All right, guys, last thing to do is just summarize, and I'll try and put it as positively as possible. Okay. Formalize your business. Yeah, that entity thing. Yeah, look for the right entity for you. Get yourself some limited liability if you can. Take care in hiring. Most workers will be classified as employees. Get to know what that means. A payroll company is a good way to manage all of those 16 things that you have to do with an employee. Be careful with using contractors because they're so much under scrutiny right now. Protect your intellectual property if you have it. Use trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and patents to do that. Yeah. Make sure that the IP that you use in your business is something that you actually can get ownership of, as opposed to being owned by somebody else. When you're giving out shares of your business to others, be very careful in that because it's highly regulated. If you have a corporation, make sure that formality-wise, that is something that you're going to pay attention to, have meeting minutes and things like that. Plan for business changes early while everyone is in agreement so that then later you just say, hey, you agreed to be bought out if you didn't meet these milestones. Okay, it's going to be so much easier getting somebody out in that way. Customer relationships, good thing to have in writing generally. Plan ahead against lawsuits, as we described, get some liability insurance, get a limited liability entity, but don't worry so much about these things because if you have plans, if you just act reasonably, generally, you're going to be okay, right? And then a lawyer can always help you get what you need going forward. All right, guys, that's pretty much what we got. I mean, what I'd say to you is if you have questions, we'll take some now, but this is our website for signing up for services, okay? www.law.berkeley.edu. And then email, go back. And then our email, if you need to reach us, is there, okay? All right, well, let's go off the screen share for a moment. How do we do this? Stop the share, good. Okay, happy to do some question and answer. Let's start with the folks that were in the chat here. Okay. Somebody checking out early. Yes, please send your questions. Good. Okay, you guys can unmute questions. Oh, looks like, there weren't any questions. Okay, Dave. Anybody have some questions? Please unmute yourself and go ahead. Questions? Well, as I said, if anybody has some other questions, maybe they want to talk private, you want to talk privately about your situation. Yeah, go back to that. I'll put it in the chat here again. www.law.berkeley.edu/NBCLC. There you go.
Yep.
Oh, oops. Oh, I did it wrong. I'm sorry. That's
Go
edu.
ahead and
Sorry.
ask your question live.
Yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
I had a quick question. I don't know if you answered it during the presentation, but the DBA, is that the same thing as establishing an LLC, and what would be the difference?
Good question there. I'm sorry, I'm putting in the chat here. This is the correct website here to just know to sign up for services there, law.berkeley.edu NBCLC. Oh, okay, so DBA, good question. So this is one of those permits that local government wants you to essentially get by registering with them. A DBA is not such a big deal. It's basically just telling the local county or sometimes your city that you are, Betty's Donuts, and this is how, and I'm Betty, and this is how you get in touch with me, and that's pretty much all they need to know. Now, in many sort of larger municipalities like Fresno or Fresno County, they'll also have something called a business license. And that's more of a fundraising kind of thing for the city. They'd say, oh, are you a for-profit business? Okay, you also have to get a business license, which is going to be, I don't know, 0.001 of your regular income or something like that. And so that's a money raising thing for the city, but it's essentially the same thing, registering with the city that you are operating. But it is not a substitute. Neither of those are substitute for creating an entity, a legal entity that is recognized by the state of California. That would be a corporation or an LLC, or you could create a partnership. A sole proprietorship is basically it doesn't require any kind of creation or registration with the state, but any of these entities that provide a limited liability will require a creation that you create it with the state, and we can help you do that.
Okay. And then my second question is when you establish a corporation or LLC, would you advise a person to establish at that level if you're bringing in a certain income due to the tax purposes? Or like, say, for instance, I, with my personal business, I'm not bringing in that much income as of yet.
Yeah.
So would it be smart to start off as a sole well, I can't say that word, but anyway.
Sole proprietor. Well, the main thing on that, you should probably talk with an accountant about what would be best for your particular income situation. But you can take business deductions, whether you're a sole on taxes, whether you're a sole proprietorship or partnership or LLC or corporation. Okay. Any of those, just your tax accountant, your accountant can help you figure out what to do with that. But so long as you haven't formed an entity, though, you're not going to be able to raise capital. You're not going to be able to get a loan from a bank very easily or investment from people. So those are some of the advantages of actually having an entity. And then, of course, that limited liability shield. If you're doing anything risky, probably a good idea to have that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And we can, again, help you form whatever entity you want. It's pretty cheap. It's basically $70 to form an LLC or a partnership in the state of California, or $100 for a corporation. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's not expensive. Okay. Okay. I won't take up too much of your time.
Oh, it's okay. That's okay. Just contact us through those office hours, and we can help you set you up for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Really great questions and solutions, right, to managing the business as you're expanding the operations of the business. And one.
Oh yeah, and by the way, Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation, as you're thinking of expanding or making, formalizing your stuff, boy, they are the best. So make sure you affiliate with them.
Yeah, one question that I always get, sometimes I get asked when existing businesses is, for example, let's say, for example, they're a sole proprietor, they've been in business for 3 years, and now as more revenues coming into the business, they want to protect that with that shield of protection, and they're considering to become either an LLC or corporation.
Yeah.
So of course, there's a name change that needs to take place, right, and paperwork. So when they make that name change, would it be considered a new entity, or is it what's the way to keep that record that they've been in business for so many years, but now they're an entity.
Well, it's sort of like, I mean, if you're lucky, the name will be available at the state level. And you can always check that on the Secretary of State's website. By the way, check both LLCs and corporations, because for some reason they separate the two, and there's two, you have to check both to make sure that the name is available. But in essence, I would say that the business hasn't actually changed. It's just you have now poured it into a separate entity, an entity that's separate from yourself is the idea. So I wouldn't say it's in any way a different kind of business. It's just you formalized it, and the state will recognize it more more formally if you make it an LLC or a corporation.
Perfect. And then the other question is for home-based businesses. So during the pandemic, we saw a lot of, individuals, perhaps they lost their job, or this is their opportunity to, go after the dream, launch their business. So there's a lot of home-based businesses. And my question is, at what point should they register to obtain their business tax certificate if they live within city limits, or business name if they live in another county area?
Well, I would say generally, if it's any kind of business that they should register, I mean, I would say probably different cities or counties will have different thresholds. If you're making a certain amount of money, then business license will be, free, or it'll be a certain amount, or that sort of thing. But I would say that, home businesses are businesses too, for sure. I would go ahead and register with both city and county, just like if you were any other kind of business. I mean, the downside, I guess I would say there are many downsides other than, maybe paying business license tax of some sort. But what I would say is that it's more likely that then a landlord could come along and say, wait a minute, there's an unregistered business in my, in my flat here, there's more ways that you could be, unstable or attacked if you weren't registered, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. And we have a comment here. So the question is, I use Fiverr to create my logo. What could I do to protect myself after, I guess, receiving that, intellectual property, perhaps?
Sure. Yeah, Bethany, that's a good thing that many people use. So Fiverr, you'd have to check the terms of use for it, because normally you would get that, with paying what you paid for it, you would get ownership of it. But some places that create logos have a business model that say, well, they're just sort of renting it from us. They get to have it, but we'll license it to them, but they have to continue to pay for that license. So I guess what I would say is go back to Fiverr, say, look at what the agreement said, and negotiate some sort of, ownership of it. If they keep holding on to it, and you're paying licensing fees going forward, I don't know. I think I would think of a different logo, frankly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I see here a guest with, okay, yes, go ahead.
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. So along the lines of what we're talking about right now with the logos, I was told that if I created a logo, for example, one of my friends who is a graphic designer helped me I created the logo, but he basically turned it into an SVG file. I was told that as long as I put the TM next to it, that basically is I don't need to register the logo, that it should already be basically considered to be my property.
No, that's
that
actually
correct?
not, no, that's actually not true. So you're talking about a logo and you want to trademark it. Yeah, the only way to trademark something like that would be, well, as I said, you get the geographic area around where you are if you've been using it and people recognize that that's your mark. But in order to get real protection for it, you would register nationally with that. And if you send me your email in the chat here, I can send you PowerPoint that shows you how to register it at in the national level. There is also the possibility of registering it in California. If you're just going to be working in California, it's a little cheaper to register a trademark in California. But if you give me your email, I can go ahead and send that to you. That how to do that. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, great. I'll write that down. I'll send that right along.
How do I send you that information?
Oh, you just put it in the
Where
chat,
do I-
right? Is it Tamara? I just, yeah. Tamara, is that yours? Grigsby, Tamara?
Oh, so we have,
Yes, I immediately send my info, so you can send it to me.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll send that to you. Yeah. Was somebody else needing that information? I'm sorry. No. Okay. Grigsby, Tamara at Gmail. Good. Okay.
and then
I can
just
send one.
to summarize the great information that we shared during the presentation. So everyone that registered through our website will be receiving a copy of the recording, in addition to the business model Canva, the one-page entity chart, and then we will also the COVID waivers for those existing businesses.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're gonna do this again in in a month, the third Friday. So looking forward to talking with you again. And do check out our website if you have additional needs for service. Okay.
Yeah. So our next legal webinar will be Friday, September 17th. So we will send over an announcement with the flyer for the topic of that month. So thank you so much, Bill, and
Okay.
all the participants that joined for today's webinar.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.